This conference will now be recorded.
Excellent. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat functionality to communicate with them or simply verbalize them. Also, to limit interferences, please put your mics on mute when the authors are talking. If you have any questions that are not directly relevant to the topics being discussed, we ask that you please save them to the end. Now, I will pass it on to Will, Seppe, and Bart.
Okay.
Wilfried, are you guys taking the lead in this?
I suggest I get started, and Bart and Seppe, whatever you think should be added, feel more than welcome to add. So maybe, well, to discuss why we wrote the book in the first place, I think the three of us have been teaching several database management and data-related courses over the years, some of us for more than 15 years. I think quite a broad range of courses, ranging from the typical introductory course on database management, dealing with data modeling, relational databases, and SQL. We're also teaching a more advanced course, let's say everything beyond the relational database, on so post-relational databases such as object-oriented XML databases, but also data federation, data distribution, the impact on transaction management, etc., up until the recent trends like big data storage and NoSQL databases. And we've also been teaching quite a few courses on data analytics. And throughout these teaching duties, I think we were somewhat dissatisfied with the available textbooks on the market. I think the major ones in some respects are somewhat imbalanced for our purposes. So on the one hand, many of them contain a lot of detail, technical details from a theoretical perspective. For instance, a whole range of variations on typical transaction management techniques, which are not really applicable or applied in practice. And on the other hand, maybe the breadth of topics they cover is not broad enough in certain respects. For instance, we think topics such as data quality, patterns to integrate your data and the impact on database management, and then especially some more recent topics like NoSQL databases and big data storage were not covered in sufficient detail for our purposes. And so that's why we decided to write our own book, which could cover different courses, both introductory and more advanced, with a kind of a consistent narrative throughout it, and with a good balance between what is breadth and depth, and also with a good balance between theory and practice, because the three of us have been involved in quite a few industry projects, practical projects as well, in different industry branches, actually, with respect to data management, data storage, and data integration, data analytics. And so we also wanted to bring that, the insights from the practical perspective into the book, and keep a good balance between practice and theory. And maybe also from a practical perspective, provides, especially for the more recent trends and fads of the days, provide a good, let's say, realistic perspective, and maybe also critical perspective on new trends and technologies, to discuss from our experience what really works and what doesn't. And maybe also what seems to be new and flashy, how it is quite often rooted in already existing technologies, and describe how it evolved from there to have a more realistic perspective on all these new hypes and trends like NoSQL technology. So I think that were some major reasons for writing the book. In addition to that, we also wanted to create a modular book, which you could target towards different audiences depending on which chapters you use or don't use in your course material, which allows you to also have the same book being used over different courses, both introductory and advanced, where you have some thread throughout it, but on the other hand, where you can also choose in a modular way which chapters are relevant to your course material and target audience in terms of technical depth and more introductory or more advanced topics. And then maybe a last reason was that we also wanted to do more than just create a physical book, but have more like a book as a service approach, where the physical book is complemented with a whole set of an ecosystem, you could say, of services. Obviously slide decks, but also YouTube lectures, online playgrounds, which Seppe will discuss in more detail, where you can practice different types of database management systems covered in the book, and also run the examples we see in the book, run them in the actual environment. Have online quizzes, etc., which also allows you to have different ways of delivering the material, either in a more traditional ex cathedra approach, but also work in a flipped classroom approach, which we do in some of our own courses. And so we've been using the book ourselves throughout the previous and this semester, and well, at least we are quite satisfied with it and working with it. Seppe, Bart, maybe you want to add something there?
I think that's a very good summarizing overview, Wilfried.
I fully agree.
I don't know if there are any questions so far or at this point from the attendees. No? Okay. Patricia, you're still there, right?
Yes, I'm still here. Okay, we have a question from Riza. Do you see it in the chat?
Let's see.
Are your students mainly computer science? Well, we have students studying computer science, obviously. The book is targeted to a very broad audience. I think not only computer science, but also information management. We actually teach it in the Faculty of Economics and Business, where we have a program, Business Engineering Management Informatics. So that's in one of the example programs that where we have a course where we adopt the book.
Maybe it's good to mention that our school is, in an international perspective, a bit atypical, because we have some programs and courses which in other countries would typically belong to an engineering faculty. So within the business economics faculty at our university, we have some quite technical and mathematical programs, amongst others aiming at business and information systems engineering. So we teach both to more technically skilled and quantitative oriented audiences, and more general purpose business oriented programs. So I think the book can be used for both, and as we see worldwide, institutions already using it is both in more computer science oriented programs and more general business information management programs.
We have a comment from Mark Regas saying, I love your reference to beer in the bios.
Maybe it's good to mention that was also an ingredient in writing the book. Beer and wine even more so.
So if anyone has any questions, they could also verbalize them if they wish, or still write them in the chat. And if not, maybe a presentation about going on to the next point in the agenda, a little walkthrough / demo of the digital playground.
Yeah, that's right. So I hope that all of you can see my screen. I will try to make the text as large as is feasible for me. So as Wilfried has already stated, the book is really set up as a book as a service approach. So the website that we provided and host ourselves is pdbmbook.com. A lot of the material there you can obviously also find on Cambridge websites, but on top of that, there is also the playground environment, as Wilfried just mentioned, and the database quiz that is added on top of there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a quick overview on the different materials and tools basically that you can find on this website. So obviously a lot of basic information about the book, which I assume most of you will have seen already. by talking with the sales team, ranging from an overview of the features, the endorsements that we have received, full overview of all the chapters, where you can zoom in on subsections that are discussed there. So if you are interested in let's say, how is SQL approached in the book, you can get a look at that. If you're interested in knowing how we take a look at newer trends like big data, data integration, and so on, you can all find that on the website as well. Apart from this, there is also a huge amount of lecture materials from online appendices that are provided online, all the way from course slides that you can obtain, and even a whole YouTube playlist where for every chapter in the book there is a YouTube video available that we use already in, as was mentioned, in the flipped classroom concept, so that students can have a look at these videos at home, and then in the course they can focus on basically practicing and so on. So here you see one of these examples that are available on YouTube. Now, if you cannot access YouTube or you don't want to use YouTube, all of these videos are available as downloads as well. So as you can see, you can download the video files just separately and use those as well. So next up, before I switch to the playground environment itself, I will first briefly show you how the database quiz works. So this is also something that we have been using in our courses to kind of help students every week to check themselves and make sure that they're still up to date with all of the course materials. So typically the way how we approach it is that as the weeks go by and we go over these chapters, we ask students to select all the chapters that have been seen so far. So let's say chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. And then basically they can go ahead and they get a series of randomized questions. So for instance here, given this specialization, which statement is correct? I'm just going to go for a guess. And turns out I was incorrect. And then you can try another question and so on. So you get the basic idea. It's a quiz. It's a testing tool that students can use, and that's also freely accessible on the website. All right, good. Now, so the playground environment itself. So what we did here is we hosted a number of database environments that are also described heavily in the book, ranging all the way from a standard SQL-based environment to NoSQL databases like MongoDB, and HBase as a big database or a big data database, let's say. So we host it ourselves. Nevertheless, we also provide a Docker file, which basically is a way how you can set up this whole environment on your own environment. Students can also install this on their own. And also here, we provide YouTube videos that help you to install the environment on your own. And also basically a full-length YouTube video that goes through the playground in more detail with examples on how to use it. So if you felt that this presentation was a bit quick or you want to know more about it, you can just basically watch this 30-minute YouTube video and you will have a very good idea on how the playground environment works. So the way how we have set up this environment is basically to make sure. So let me go ahead and log in here. Is basically to make sure that all the examples that you find in the book, and there are many, so in an appendix that we provide also regarding this online environment, you can basically follow along and try the examples out in this environment yourself as well, and so can students. Also throughout the book, if you look at chapters such as the chapter on chapter 7 on the structured query language, all of the examples and all of the query statements that are provided there can be simply checked out or tried out in the practice environment to verify the results yourself, to play with the SQL statements, to see what they do, and also for students to exercise with them. So these are the playgrounds, as we call them, that we currently provide. So there is one for standard relational database, and as Wilfried has said, we're very much in love with beer and wine. So hence the reason why one of our databases deals with wine. That's also the setting that we use in the book. We have a MongoDB database, which is a NoSQL database that we host. We have Cypher, which is, well, Cypher is the language that Neo4j uses, which is a social network database. We have some visualizations regarding some tree structures that are discussed in the book as well, amongst which binary search trees, B trees, and B plus trees. And we have HBase as one of those Hadoop style or big data style databases, as I mentioned before. So the way how they work is very easy. So you just open up the database that you want to play with. So let me go ahead and open up the wine database here, for instance. And you can just get started with writing SQL statements and checking the results. The tables in this database are listed on the site. So I can, for instance, go ahead and try to select all records from the product table. So if I do that, what I see is I basically get the exact same result as I would get when reading the book, basically. So it's the exact same database that we use here as the one that's being used to guide readers in the book. So this is a completely free-form playground environment. So students can go ahead and they can basically make mistakes. So they're even free to go ahead and delete everything, basically, from the product table. So they don't need to worry about making mistakes. If they go ahead and select again, they see that all of their records have been removed. So they can basically try out any SQL command that they like. If they feel that they dig themselves a little bit too deep and they want to start over with a fresh instance from the database, they can just go ahead and reset everything and they're back up to the original version of the database. So basically, this is a way how students can practice all sorts of SQL-based commands. So selections, inserting records, deleting records, updating them, playing around with joins. Basically, everything that's described in the book can be tested out here as well. So that's the SQL-based playground. The next one that I will show up is the MongoDB one. So that's an instance of a NoSQL database. Also here, we provide a wine database, but now in NoSQL form. So basically, there, if you would follow the commands that we discuss in the book and in the appendix of the book, you can get started with writing commands here as well. For instance, to get the list of collections, and then perhaps going ahead and saying, well, give me from the products collection, give me back all the results that are in there. And basically the same information appears here, but this time we're using MongoDB as our database. So it's the same kind of setup. The database is different, but here too, you can go ahead and delete everything. You can go ahead and insert new documents. You can go ahead and change them. You can go ahead and create new collections. That's all fine. Also here, you can just reset everything back to its initial state. Then next up, whoops. Next up, I will show you the social network-based database, or the graph-based database, which is Neo4j. So that's the one that we hosted here, and also the one that we discussed in the book. Also there we have provided two databases, a book club database, which is the one used in the book in the chapter on NoSQL, and also an additional beer database, which is larger, a bit more challenging as well, which can be explored by students too. So the book club database, let me give a quick tour on that one. So this one takes a bit longer to load because the database is a bit heavier to set up. So here again, an example query in Cypher is provided. So if I go ahead and run that one, you will see that I get the whole database basically. So here I'm basically just showing the whole database. Since this is a graph-based database, we provide two forms of visualization. If you ask for a graph or for a subgraph, you will see the graph appearing, but we also show the details of the nodes and the edges in this database as well. So here too, it's basically the same system. If you go through the book and you read through the examples, basically, you can also just go ahead and copy from the book, trying it out and seeing if the results match with what we tell you that they should look like in the book. So here, for instance, I'm running a query that, given a certain genre, humor, and given a certain person, Bart Baesens, tries to find all the friends that have also written books in the same genre. So here you see I'm basically getting the result as is described in the book as well. So that's another type of database that is included. And then next up, we also have some visualizations that help to make some of the concepts that we discuss in the book a little bit more tangible. For instance, when you talk about binary search trees, you can go ahead and step by step try to build a tree, and animations are provided to slowly show what's happening here. So as you go ahead and you play with this data structure, you can basically also check that what we describe in the book, how these things are being used, how they match with how it actually happens. So you can make your own tree, add elements, delete elements, and also search elements through there. So that's it with regards to how this basically works. So we host it ourselves. It's free to set up an account and to register. It's also, you can also download this whole environment on your own, set it up on your own servers, or just have students install it on their own laptops if they want to play around with it. So that's all fine. The most important thing for us is that it is useful and that people will use this. So just as an example to show you what this would look like if you set it up on your own machine, it would just look like this. So you don't get everything, you don't get the whole website, you basically just get this playground environment. So it looks like this. You don't need to log in anymore because you're running it on your own machine. And it's the same concept. So here too, you can pick one of the databases, you can run some queries, you can also reset everything back. So it looks exactly the same as the way it looks on the website that we have set up. So it's an exact match. So I think that gives you guys a good general tour on what we've tried to set up here. All the information is listed on the website, and you can get basically the full details there. Wilfried, Bart, I don't know if I have forgotten something here or something else that I should mention at this point.
I don't think so.
I think you did a very fine job explaining the playground. So it's indeed a way to allow students to have some hands-on experience with different types of database systems without all the hassle of setting them up themselves. So I think it's a way of tasting the different systems without too much technical issues in setting them up on your own premises. In the meantime, I see that some additional questions have popped up in the chat. So I suggest I just go through them chronologically. And yeah, again, if Bart and Seppe, if you have anything to add, or if the audience wants to ask any questions either through chat or just by voice, feel free. Maybe before we get to the questions in the chat, are there any particular questions regarding the playground or things that you would like to see explained in more detail or illustrated in more detail?
I would like to ask a question for Riza Myers, since they have to leave early. They ask, which RBDMS are you using? There are some minor syntactical differences between the major ones.
Well, in the playground, the relational database system we're using is MySQL, but actually in the book, it's not that we have a preference or a choice for any particular system. So we try to stay independent from any implementation. If we are really explaining features or functionality of one particular system, then we also mention it explicitly. We do that in some cases, but in most cases, we stay away from any particular relational database management system. So what we say should be applicable to all of them. Myself, I've worked with MySQL, with Oracle, with Sybase in the past, Microsoft SQL Server. But in the book, we stay agnostic to any particular RDBMS implementation.
Great. Let's take a look at some of the other questions too. We do have one from BTW, person with the screen name BTW19, and they're asking, where can I get access to the slides of this talk, especially the matrix chapters and the levels?
Right. So the slides that you saw being shown just now, I guess it was the slide on. I guess that the attendee means this slide stack. So you can basically just download it on the website itself. So if you go straight to the homepage, you see here that it says download the presentation covering the book's features. That's basically the same slide stack. So if you want to get like an overview on the book and its features, and also that audience chart that I just showed, that's all in this presentation.
Okay, one other question I saw in the chat was about it would be a great, I'm just reading out loud, it would be a great if some features of ODBC and JDBC would be added as a separate chapter, just an ID. Well, actually there is a separate chapter about, let's say, all the stuff related to an application interacting with the database system. So it's about database APIs, including ODBC and JDBC. It's about object relational mapping layers, so actually hiding the relational interfaces like ODBC or JDBC, and it's about the position of the database in a web setting if your client is actually a web browser and not a client application, so how to go about that. So as you can see also in the overview, it covers most of the database API technologies. Also there, from sometimes, if necessary, a critical perspective. To give an example, in ADO.NET, where you have the data sets and the disconnected aspect, where your result set is actually disconnected from the actual database where you retrieved the results from. Yeah, it also has impact on, for instance, transaction consistency, etc. So all of that is crammed into one single chapter dealing with interacting with the database if you don't have interactive SQL, but if you are interacting with it from an application. So that's one of the more technical chapters of the book. So you can include it in a course, you can also leave it out if it's too technical. It depends on your purposes.
Excellent. I'm also looking in my chat as well to see if we have a question from Mark Regas, and he asks, do you prefer SQL Server or another?
I prefer Postgres personally, but I mean as a relational database. But again, we try to be as agnostic as possible. It's not a book on a particular vendor or particular implementation. It's hard to say that we have kind of a clear preference towards one or the other. I guess Wilfried, the same holds for you, right?
Yeah, and also depends on what you need, of course, and not only in terms of database functionality, but also in terms of the whole ecosystem surrounding the database. For instance, if you prefer Oracle and the tool set for process management and data integration that comes with it, or if it's just a bare database functionality you need. So it's not only about the database engine itself, but also the tool set surrounding it. I think that's also one of the things we want to do in the book, in terms of especially the chapter dealing with data integration technology, etc., to explain that you have a whole ecosystem surrounding the database, with, in the case of IBM and Oracle and others, a lot of fancy names of different types of data integration tools and techniques. We try to kind of stay away from the actual names and move towards the actual patterns that are supported by the integration techniques. So for instance, in the case of Oracle, you have a whole suite of data integration tools that you can have along with the database. We try to look for the underlying patterns of these tools, which would allow you to make a choice depending on you would prefer a consolidated or a federated approach if you need to combine multiple data sources, for instance, and the same patterns actually exist but under different names and different tool sets in an IBM or in a Microsoft environment. So also there it depends on not only the database engine, but what you need in terms of tools that support data integration and data access.
Excellent. Going down in the chat, we have another question, and the question is, any plans to expand the SQL material? One chapter seems too little.
Well, to begin with, I think it's quite an extensive chapter. Actually, to be honest, there's two chapters on SQL. So the main chapter on SQL is the one that provides the basics, but the chapter on object relational databases also contains a lot of extensions about SQL. So the object relational extensions, also extensions in the data warehousing chapters on dealing with, for instance, using a relational database and SQL to analyze a data set from multiple dimensions in an OLAP fashion. So actually there's other chapters containing SQL code as well, and SQL explaining SQL statements as well. Also the chapter on database APIs deals with embedded APIs and the language specificalities of SQL in that respect. So we actually deliberately opted for one single chapter that deals with SQL as such and as a language as such, but then some specific applications of SQL are actually and extensions are dealt with in other chapters. Yet another chapter is the one dealing with XML, where we have some SQL extensions to map relational structures to XML structures and vice versa. So yeah, there's other chapters dealing with SQL also. But if you need the basics in an introductory course on SQL and databases, then you're fine with that single SQL chapter.
Excellent. Another question we have is also any plans to introduce spatial querying?
So we actually refer to that topic in the NoSQL chapter. Where we basically make the decision to zoom in on some particular types of NoSQL databases, and already quite extensive overview all the way from key value stores to document stores, column-oriented databases, and graph-based databases. When we talk about other NoSQL categories, we also use it basically as an opportunity to highlight the fact that we see more and more niche-oriented databases appearing, of which geospatial query support and geospatial databases or one particular type. Nevertheless, we do not go into full detail regarding all the geospatial relation operators that you can apply in geospatial SQL extensions as you find them in PostGIS and in SQL Server, because we feel that it will also deviate a bit too much from the principles of database management as we try to outline them here.
Got it. And scrolling down in the chat, Masadi, Professor Masadi makes a comment. Can you see that, Will?
Let me see.
They're saying, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that the book does not go into the theory of databases too much. This is a great text for information technology majors. Yeah, I think it has to do with what I already mentioned, that we really wanted to strike a balance between theoretical foundation, of course, but also what you do need to know in practice and what has practical relevance. And of course, it's always a decision to leave things out and not, but I think we did strike a good balance there. We also included some appendages online, for instance, on relational algebra and relational calculus, to have some further details if needed. But yeah, I think we really put a lot of effort in striking a balance between theory and practical relevance.
And Pam, thank you very much for sharing the link with everybody to the author's website, and also the page to where everybody can see the book on our website. And if anybody has any more questions, they can also verbalize it as well. We have a comment from Mark Regas.
I think the level of theory is good for my data science undergraduates, sophomore and junior level students. Yes, indeed. That basically, again, emphasizes the same goal of the textbook. I myself also teach a course on analytics and data science, and also there, what we observe from students and the link to practice also is that having a good grasp on database management, databases, and also SQL is still a very useful skill for a data scientist to have. And we also include some chapters on analytics. It's basically the closing chapter that we provide that can also help them to bridge the link or to make the bridge between what database management is all about and what data science is all about.
And we also have Lauren Cowles. She does bring up a good point. We've had questions about data governance from quite a few professors. So, I mean, not during this chat right now, but in the past. And is that covered in the book?
It is being covered, I think, at different levels. So in the introductory part, we explain when we deal with the different roles in a database setting, we explain that actually governance is more important, and also the roles that are involved there. We have the chapter, one of the later chapters, where we deal with data governance, data quality, etc., where we go quite extensively into the issues on how to deal with data governance. Obviously, you could write a separate book on data governance, but where we try to at least provide an overview of what is relevant, which aspects there are to be governed in terms of quality, in terms of security, in terms of trade-offs to be made about different technologies, also some frameworks that can be used there. So that's a chapter mainly dedicated to different aspects of governance. Also, I think in the chapter on physical database organization, where we deal with data storage environments and storage area networks and the technological aspects there, we also give a lot of information about the trade-offs from a governance perspective you should be making in terms of, for instance, investments on being up and running quite swiftly after an accident or a failure, or the impact of different technologies in terms of both the impact on the time to be up and running again, the time or the amount of data you may be losing, and also the type of investments you need to be making to support your aims that you have set in the governance effort. So I think both in the more technology-oriented chapter and in the pure governance chapter, we deal with quite a lot of aspects of data governance.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And there is, and some of these topics that you cover, such as big data and analytics, how can professors integrate these topics into their course?
Well, that's maybe mainly the topic of Seppe and Bart, but let me get started. I think in the parts I teach on, for instance, data warehousing, within the purely database-oriented courses, at least I want my students to understand why we need data warehousing and what type of decisions we want to make based on these data, and which technologies we use to analyze these data, because in the end, the type of technology will also have an impact on, for instance, the type of database solution you need, SQL or NoSQL, relational or other, but also on, for instance, the measures you have to take in terms of data quality, because some techniques are much more are are impacted much more by data quality issues than others. So also already for that reason, it's important, I think, to have some sensitivity towards the type of technologies and methods you will be using to analyze the data. But I think the chapter is quite extensive, so you could also use it in an introductory course on data analytics, for instance, apart from the pure database courses.
That's right. I think generally there's two ways how you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Boyd.
No, it was just the chapter on analytics built a bit further upon the business intelligence part that we discussed in the data warehousing chapter. It actually provides a bird's eye overview of the whole data analytics process model, focusing on data pre-processing, different types of analytics, post-processing, critical success factors, as you can see listed right there. It's a bit more advanced. So, I mean, you can integrate it in a more advanced database modeling class if you like.
Or it could also be used as material, for instance, something we're considering for the future. If you have some more integrated course where you do data analysis starting from data collection and integration up till the analysis of the data, then I think with a single book you have an overview of everything you need for that type of more, let's say, seminar or practice-oriented type of classes where you do, as a student, the entire trajectory from data collection to data analysis.
Seppe, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I guess the gist of it has been covered. Like in terms of integration, I think we take a good two-step approach where basically you can basically go from the database management world towards the analytics world, and then you basically build up from why is data management necessary, what is the role of a database, how do I set this up in the correct manner. Obviously then, and the book also progresses in this way, the questions that will follow afterwards is how do I derive insights from the data that I have, right? So how do I set up business intelligence tooling around this, which we discuss? And then following from that, we have the chapters on that can both expand on this, which is big data and analytics. Right now I have really a whole lot of data to deal with. What are the concerns that I need to think about in that case? And also if I want to then connect this whole build up to a predictive modeling approach, for instance, how can I do so then? And that is where chapter 20 provides a bird's eye overview, as Bart said. On the other hand, the book is also suited for people coming from the other side that might already have a good grasp on everything that is discussed in chapter 20, so the typical data scientist role, but want to also brush up their skill set somewhat in terms of database administration, database management, right? So to have a more clear overview on all the concepts that come into play when dealing with database management. So it can really work in two ways, I think.
Excellent. And Pam Cooper, she has a question as well. How do your students respond to the ongoing case study? Are there specific ways that you use it in class?
Bart, maybe that's something you could.
Yeah, we just, you mean the sober case study? Is that what you're referring to? I guess that's it, right?
I guess so.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I guess.
I see the beginning at the beginning of a chapter. There's information, and then at the end of the chapter. But I just wondered how you know, how do you know, what do they respond in? And are there ways that you use it in class?
Sometimes we let them, we have an end of lecture discussion about the sober case, where we started from the problem statement stated at the beginning of the chapter, and then try to work together with the students towards the end solution. Obviously, we always provide the end solution. It's also included in the book, but it's just a matter of actually stimulating some discussion about topics that have been covered in the chapter. Make sense?
Yep. Just wondered about it. They looked very good. I didn't realize that there was the material at the end of each chapter until I looked at it.
Yeah. There we come back to the case study and try to provide some useful insights based upon the chapter to the problem statement that we started the chapter off with. Can I ask again, who's speaking?
Oh, this is Pam Cooper.
Okay, cool. Can I also ask a question to the audience, maybe? Who is actually using the book? Can you write down if you're using the book in your course, and what's the title of the course that you're using it, or the university you're connected to? If you could put that in the chat, would be great.
Hi, this is Mark Regas. I'm using the book in a data science class at Penn State University. It's called Data Science 220, Data Management.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Or maybe if you're not using it yet, you could say which course you're thinking about it for. That would be helpful too, probably, to know and interesting.
Okay.
Oh, well. It'd be interesting.
All right, so we do have about 12 minutes left. If this is now the time where anyone could ask any questions they would like, their final chance. And I just wanted to say, if anybody thinks of any questions afterwards that they did not ask during the webinar, it would be okay for them to email the professors.
Yeah, guys, you can feel free to email us in case of any questions, or if you need any specific information. As Wilfried mentioned, the book is offered as a service. That means that it comes with a lot of goodies like slides, as we mentioned, free YouTube lectures, even the MP4s, the playground which Seppe demonstrated, the database quiz, and so on. So there's lots of stuff that comes with it. So feel free to contact us in case of any questions you may have related to that.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
go
that
ahead.
I say that contact information is on your website that we posted earlier, right?
Yep.
It's right at the bottom. So you can just contact us through this link.
Yeah, or just Google our names and you'll find our email.
Or Google our names, or and all our details are here as well. So just feel free to contact us with any questions.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, if nobody has any more questions, any further questions, I just wanted to say thank you again, Will, Bart, and Seppe, for making time out of your busy schedules to speak to prospect professors, or even professors who are using your book now too. And yeah, we greatly appreciate it. Also, to anyone who is left on the line, we did record this webinar as announced in the beginning, and we will do our best to make this recording available. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank the people who have attended it and given their participation as well.